Hey everybody, Josh Hannaberry here, Truck Focus Podcast. First off, I hope you're having a really good day. I'm super excited, June 15th, and I'd say as an industry, we're really making waves just as we continue to progress through this interesting time. So all professional drivers out there, shout out. Just please stay safe. Please keep doing what you're doing. It's greatly appreciated. To all the commercial carriers doing it right, operating within the boundaries of compliance. Again, hats off to yourselves. Really appreciate all of your efforts, especially not even just through this time, but I'll highlight just the challenges that we're still facing, just different restrictions in place that professional drivers are faced with, and yeah, just really appreciate it. So in today's video, I'm calling it When the Clock Stops. And what that means is 3 days into the Canadian mandate for ELDs, so electronic logging devices, and what that, I guess the impact of that, I should say, not only from a vendor standpoint, where a lot of the conversation is, getting their products certified in Canada through third party. First off, shout out to Transport Canada. It's great to see a second accreditation company in place, so well done, as well as to all those involved. I know it's a really trialing period, and this, again, we appreciate everything you're doing. So a lot of the conversation that I've heard, that I've observed pretty steadily, is that a lot of the topic is around the product. So an ELD and those vendors that are offering them. There's some really good vendors out there. So just keep doing what you're doing. But I wanted to talk more on the impacts of the clock on the mindset of a customer, a carrier, and a driver, because I feel that's equally as important as the product itself. I understand not all federal carriers in Canada operate over the road for weeks on end. Some of them can be a Monday to Friday. They just happen to have, locations or customers in multiple jurisdictions. So they meet the classifications of a federal carrier, and they're now required to have an ELD, even with the soft mandate in place for the next 12 months. And so from a customer standpoint, things that we're really going to have to start paying attention to is when a lot of it's last minute. So pre-planning is super important in any industry. But if you are considered a customer to a trucking company, my encouragement to you now, which maybe I should have shared a year ago, was start planning a little more in advance. I understand we don't live in a perfect world, so we don't always have the opportunity to have months of planning kind of at our fingertips. Emergencies happen, and I get that. But pre-planning is key. What I mean by that is, I'm not saying carriers cheat the system, not all anyway, but I am aware that certain carriers have. So even though hours of service legislation has been in place and they, as companies, have to follow it, there's been situations where they just simply don't, and a customer may not realize that. So now with an actual electronic clock, I guess if they're not exempt, there's going to be a device in the cab of the truck that a driver is connected to, and not physically, but through electronics, telling them the hours of service. So telling them how many hours of on-duty driving they have, on-duty 16-hour window, all that good stuff. So customers, you can be prepared to hear, sorry, I don't have a driver with the hours to do it. And that's a good thing. That means that carriers, liking it or not, are now abiding by the rules of hours of service, which is obviously the main point of a certified ELD. And so from a customer standpoint, pre-planning is key, the best that you can. So that way, if you know that you have a really big job site, say you're moving rebar, and all of a sudden your prime contractor needs this many more pieces of rebar, you're not scrambling all the time to find carriers with drivers with hours. You're pre-planning. So you have that in place. So if you're thinking, okay, this is a really big order, just in case, let's make sure we have 2 or 3 backup carriers or backup trucks ready just in case, then do it. That's my recommendation. Another recommendation is that you're going to want to make sure carriers are following the hours of service legislation properly, that their drivers are, because if you don't know the carriers that are hauling your product, so say rebar again, so you're going to go from, I'm in Calgary, so we'll say Calgary to Manitoba to Winnipeg, and a driver or a carrier is just like, oh yeah, we can get there, no problem at all. But by the time you consider they're not preloaded, so they're going to your facility, get loaded, strapping it down, doing the required checks, fuel, all that good stuff, going to the bathroom, whatever the driver has to do to get to Winnipeg, they're hard pressed to make it. So if you have carriers guaranteeing, yeah, it's rushed, yeah, it's fine, they'll make it, and it's not a team driver situation, pay attention to that, because you don't want your product sitting on the side of the road because someone fell asleep, someone got pulled over by law enforcement, and they're out of service, whatever that case may be. So just pre-planning is important, knowing your carriers is important, but also knowing legislation yourself, so that way you don't have exhausted drivers hauling your stuff. So rebar, equipment, dry van, whatever it is. So it's really important. So again, from a driver or from a customer's perspective, I'm sorry, be really mindful and don't get offended if a carrier is honest with you and says, I know where you're go-to, but all of my drivers are houred out. So if they're a federal carrier, they're either running cycle 1, cycle 2. So they either have 70 hours in any 7 days, or they have 120 hours, 14 days. So there's restrictions in hours on a cycle, so in a time period, but also in a day. So if a carrier says, honestly, I don't have someone with the hours that can legally make it by the time you need it, believe me, it's hard for them to say that because it's possible revenue loss, but it's the right thing because they're following the hours of service, the regulations. So from a customer side, remember, or just be mindful of that. It's not them trying to always avoid work. It's just them being honest. Okay, so from a carrier's perspective, how you dispatch, how you manage your fleet, all of the, the intricacies of your organization will change. And it's a good thing. It's a more compliant thing. And I always try and say, operate within the boundaries of compliance. So 13, 14, 16 is the law. Sure, there's different adverse weather conditions and emergency, whatever. You can't run your business thinking he's going to get the extra 2 hours because something's going to happen. It doesn't work that way. So you're going to have to be really mindful, especially if your drivers are maxing out the allowable hours, that they're actually taking the right time off. So in Canada, it's 8 and 2. So 8 consecutive off duty, 2 additional in the 30-minute or greater sections. So 8 hours in a sleeper berth or 8 hours off duty is 8 hours. It's no longer 7 hours and 53 minutes that I know a lot of people are used to seeing. It is 30-minute or greater breaks to equivalent of 2 hours. So you can't be cheating that or saying, oh, I didn't realize, because your system, it knows. So your system's not going to actually allow your drivers to continue to drive. So when you're dispatching just to different locations, be really mindful of that. Be mindful that your drivers have to find safe places to sleep. They have to be able to get to somewhere and back just within their legal hours. It's, again, being familiar in our industry, especially in Western Canada, I've seen time and time again, people with the paper log, they will just kind of extend that time so they can find somewhere to rest, knowing full well that it's going to take them 15 hours to do this trip, and they legally only have the 13 and the 14, 16-hour window. So be really mindful of that, carriers. Speak with your dispatchers. If you're self-dispatching, speak with yourself. Give yourself kind of a pep talk to make sure that okay, my drivers, there is a clock, there's limitations, because if they're on the roadside and I put them in a bad spot to break the law, you're also going to have a conversation possibly from an auditor, possibly from an investigator or law enforcement. So be really mindful of that. And just, make sure that you're working with your drivers, not against your drivers when we're talking hours of service, but training is super important. So there's a lot of just obviously different demographics in our industry, which I absolutely love and respect, but make sure you're taking the time to train the actual device. So if it's handheld, if it's something fixed in the cab of the truck or the tractor, give them the time. Like I'm talking to professional drivers. So if you're a carrier and you have a fleet, if it's one person, if it's yourself, or if you have 1,000, doesn't matter. Give them time to learn the system and lead with empathy. That's a big thing, is leading with empathy. So that way, if they make a mistake, oh, I pushed the wrong button. Oh, I forgot to do this. Oh, I've never had one of these before. Be empathetic. Let them feel as people and as professionals, hey, you made a mistake. Okay, we learned from it. Let's just move on. It's not a reason to hammer on people. It's not a reason to belittle people. It's just, let's be empathetic. From a dispatch perspective, let's also be empathetic as dispatchers, because again, drivers are going to have to be ultra sensitive now to their time restrictions, because again, you can't plan something knowing full well, okay, I'll just extend my paper. That's gone, thankfully. And I don't support that whatsoever. I just understand it. I've seen it happen. And so from a dispatch standpoint, again, former dispatcher myself, you kind of get a little egotistical because you like having a clear board. You like thinking, yeah, I got these 19 things on the go and these guys are pre-planned back. And that part's exciting. That's kind of where you get the juicy job. We have to be mindful and you have to be empathetic. You can't force, you can't push, you can't threaten, do it or else. That's, again, that tyrant mentality has to be gone. And I wish it didn't exist in the first place. But again, being in the industry for some time, I understand it is. And I think ELDs will help kind of push that out. But again, from a dispatch standpoint, be mindful. And when you're working, a lot of times dispatchers are kind of the thankless position because they're dealing with ownership, they're dealing with sales, they're dealing with drivers, sometimes they're dealing with mobile mechanics. Like they do a lot of different things and it's a really proud position. So hats off to them. But just be mindful of what drivers are going through and feel free to stand up for yourself and stand up for your fleets, your drivers, to say, look, this is the legal amount of hours I have. This is how long it's going to take. And then that way you play within the boundaries of compliance. Okay. You have to operate that way. So from a service mechanic standpoint, same thing. So again, I get mechanical repairs can take a long time, but if you get a driver that has reported a minor or a major defect, we'll stick with minor because that's kind of a more common thing. They don't have all day to wait now if they have an urgent load to get out onto the road. So I'm not saying mechanics are lazy by any means, same thing, highly respect the position. And I'm good friends with a handful of mechanics and they're magicians. I say that all the time. You're a magician of the trade because how you fix that, no clue, beyond me. But be mindful of the fact that drivers seem pushy. Again, it's because it's a learning curve. And the fact that you're kind of like, I really gotta go, I gotta get there. And I only have this much time. And it's always been the case, but it's even more in your face now because of the system. So let's work together. So professional drivers, first off, hats off to you. I try my hardest to always compliment the trade. I strongly believe in the profession. You're over the road legends. And I'm so grateful. If Avery was here, he'd say the same, my 11-year-old, just on how impactful you are as a person and how much value you bring to our industry. So thank you. So this will be, when we're talking ELDs, this will be a massive learning curve to you. It's a good thing. It's going in the right direction. So first off, regardless of age, gender, culture, welcome to, I guess, the future, which the future is now, because ELDs are not going away. So if you're working for a carrier and they're still figuring out which is the best one, which one, we don't have any accredited ones yet. So once that gets sorted out, different conversation. But be open-minded to the opportunities that an ELD will bring. Be the captain of your ship. That's the piece of advice that one of my old bosses and mentors used to say is be the captain of your ship. Now more than ever, we need industry, we need professional drivers to be the captain of their ship. Because again, not saying everyone, but I have heard multiple stories of 2 logbooks, 2 paper logs. You can't do that ever again. Not in a world where everything's electronic, everything's timed, and the data, the knowledge that the data will bring is pretty powerful. So don't put yourself in a position where you feel that's what you have to do, because you can't. And that's just, again, I don't want to be preachy, just I'm being assertive, but be open to the technology. Be open to the fact that you're learning and you're progressing as a professional, and the fact that you can really, it's interesting when not only is an ELD good for tracking hours of service performance, but one of the most common things, just I guess from a log monitoring perspective, is the form and manner violations that compile over 14 days plus current is nuts. Oh, I forgot to sign that one. Oh, my math was wrong on that one. Yeah, I can't really read that, or I forgot to put the province. All of those things are gone, basically, now that you're electronic. So neat writing, who cares? You can have a doctor's writing and you're good to go. As long as you remember to sign it, as long as your hours are accurate, use personal conveyance, start end odometer, you don't exceed limits. But really, it's not that hard. It's really to your advantage. So just keep that in mind. If there's a technical issue, make sure you're confident speaking to whoever's on the end. If it's an internal person or an external person helping you fix the problem, be mindful of that. but be mindful that everyone's going through a massive learning curve, and we're relying on you as professional drivers to really grasp the system. So same pressure and encouragement, two of the same that I'll put on carriers to educate. Drivers need to have the open mind to learn and to embrace. So that way you can always make sure you're doing the right thing if you're on the roadside and you're going through an inspection. 3 buttons, here's an inspection mode, officer, please take a look. To maybe you turned it off and it won't turn back on. There's a battery issue. Hey, I can help. Like just being mindful of that, not hating it because there's an issue, there's a glitch. It's being mindful and just being proactive, I should say, not mindful. So that's my encouragement. It's honestly, it's super easy. You can email yourself your daily log. So if you're tracking it for tax purposes, or if you're working for multiple carriers and you're trying to track everything and share proper documentation, it's super easy. But the biggest win, honestly, is the form and manner violations are gone. As long as you know how to sign in, you know how to sign your logs, you know how to sign out. That's kind of standard. Going into on duty to on duty sleeper berth, trip inspections, most are electronic now. A lot of the systems have that feature. Honestly, you're going to like it. And now is just a really good time to learn, just because there is a 12-month grace soft education, soft enforcement period, just for like from law enforcement's perspective. So just be mindful. But yeah, just keep up the great work. So again, when the clock stops, it's just super important that you're not in a position where now you feel obligated to break the law, because that violation won't go away for 14 days. So that's kind of your worst case scenario. You can get inspected. But then if your carrier goes through an audit, that could be up to 6 months. Well, you have to keep it on file for digitally for the 6 months, where you don't want to put yourself at risk from fatigue. But from violation standpoints, you don't want to have that in your book because you're stressed. So I don't want to get pulled over. They're going to find it. But you also have to think about that for 6 months, because there is no this additional, yeah, it took me 28 minutes, but I'm only putting 5 because I only had 5. That kind of stuff, that's gone. So just be really mindful. Make sure that you're always protecting yourself. Because one thing I like to say is you protect yourself, you're protecting the equipment, you're protecting the cargo you're hauling, and best of all, you're protecting the public, and you're being a professional. So just keep that in mind. But again, thank you so much as professional drivers for everything that you're doing. And for industry as a whole, as we continue to get used to ELDs, when the clock stops, that's when it stops. This really matters. And as an industry, we have some really good opportunities to just advance, start learning from data. You can start learning like throttle positions. You can learn which gears are the best to be in for highest fuel economy, or I guess best fuel economy. You can start tracking fuel better. You can track defects better if you're going electronic DVIRs as well. But there's lots of exciting stuff coming up. If you're not already operating on a system going through the accreditation process, you soon will. And it's just really exciting times. So thank you everyone for checking in. And just again, for all the constant support, it means the world. And just have a really safe day. Take care, everyone.